In 2024, 12 million artists uploaded music to Spotify. Less than 0.6% generated $10,000 or more in royalties. Even if we assume that some portion of that is just AI junk, we know that that's still millions of real people trying their damnedest to make music, and that's only the ones who go to the effort of putting it on Spotify. All these people putting so much work into their art, and only a tiny fraction of that can possibly receive any significant attention. We all know that not everyone who makes art is going to find an audience, but if you're someone who does make art and it's not appreciated, or, it's only appreciated by a few people near to you, you're in good company with most of the artists who have ever existed in all of human history. I don't know if that's very comforting, but if you're an artist who lives and creates as part of this obscure majority, screaming into the void, you're not alone. I'm going to assume that you don't do what you do for purely cynical, selfish reasons. And if you've kept doing what you like to do for all this time and you've never gotten fame or fortune or even moderate success to the point where you could do it as a job, then the only reason you keep doing it is because you know that the joy of creating a thing in itself makes doing it worthwhile. You probably also know the feeling of making something and then feeling really proud of it, and then you know how that pride can curdle into shame, because it's not good to be prideful, so you check it. You don't want to be the fool who creates egotistical anti-masterpieces, believing the entire time that you're making something great.
First of all, you have to see the room at least 100 times. I'm not exaggerating. I'm really serious about it.
But it can feel a bit like a catch-22. They say, love what you do, believe in what you make. But at the same time, don't assume it's great. Don't sing your own praises. It feels like a fine line. Everyone who makes art and shares it wants others to appreciate it. Else, why would you share it at all? But when you share something that you love and it doesn't get much attention, it can feel really disappointing. But when you put yourself down and you tell yourself that you don't know whether your art's really great and maybe it's terrible, that feels very demoralizing and it's hard to keep going. So what is the correct approach? I don't know for sure, but I think there's probably a middle ground here. You can love what you make and at the same time not assume that others will necessarily love it. But this train of thought leads me to something different. When I think about our relationship as humans to art, I start to think about how we view these things really individualistically, like proprietary works that belong to certain people. And it may be surprising to hear, but that's not really how it always was. Folk music, for example, doesn't mean now what it used to mean. It's a genre now. It's an aesthetic. It's defined by certain instruments like acoustic guitars and simpler productions and softer vocals, softer sounds and moods. You know what I'm getting at. But that's not what folk music used to be. I mean, we use the term folk because it was the music of the common people, which stood in stark contrast to the refined composition of the aristocrats who had all the resources and technical knowledge. But traditional folk music reflects the roots of human culture and art. It was not so much an artistic pursuit external to daily life. It was interwoven with it. Nowadays, we mostly think of people as being singers or not being singers, but it wasn't that long ago when people used to sing together, work songs, tavern songs, gospel songs. There are exceptions. Not every song was meant to be sung together. Some were ballads or longer stories, but when I think of a traditional folk song, I think of a song that's got a catchy tune that can be sung easily in a group. It's easy to pick up. The lyrics repeat in a pattern usually, so it's easy to follow along, and encourages others to take it up and sing it with you, to memorize it, pass it on. Maybe a process of natural selection, you could say, because the catchier songs are probably the more likely ones to persist over generations. It was a song that no one knew the author of. It was an oral tradition, just like folk stories, mythology, and just like those, the songs altered gradually along the way. People didn't have a rigid concept of somebody owning a song. And because of that, they weren't afraid to add their own spin. I'm sure they did so intentionally sometimes or just by accident. Maybe somebody tries out a new verse that other people liked and suddenly that's just part of the song. Or maybe they forget exactly how it went and have to come up with new words on the spot, and then those words become part of the song and they get passed on. The core always stayed the same, but it was evolving. And then these stories and songs would become signifiers of their culture. They were gifts that their ancestors left them. But now this practice is dead. Sure, many old songs like this still exist, and sometimes people learn them, but they don't evolve anymore. This was a way of art that was so ubiquitous across human culture for so long, and it's dead now, or at least dormant. So, to put it in other words, folk music and stories sort of existed in a state of open collaboration. The work was free to evolve. And the reason this practice is effectively dead is because both legally and psychologically, we now view art as something that someone creates and has possession of, not just in the sense of you can't plagiarize or duplicate this, but also intellectual property. You can't retell a story in your own words and publish it. You can't use other people's characters. You can't take this song and go and make a new version of it with slightly different lyrics or structure. Copyright is meant to prevent people from plagiarizing or redistributing somebody's work for profit. It's copyright, and that's reasonable. It does, in theory, protect artists who worked hard to create something from shameless scammers, even though it's not always applied fairly. We all know it's a lot harder to protect your work from theft if you don't have the resources to hire lawyers. But intellectual property, on the other hand, seems a lot more flimsy. And you can agree to disagree with me on this, but does IP actually protect artists? Or does it just prevent competition? I don't know, maybe this sounds radical, but I believe that if you want to go and publish your own Lord of the Rings sequels, you should be allowed to do that. I think if an indie game company wanted to create their own Zelda or Mario game using the characters and the concepts, but not the assets, they create all their own stuff, then I think they should be allowed to do that. And yeah, fan art, fan fiction, fan games, these things already exist, but the creators can't profit off of them. And besides that, these works sort of exist in a legal gray area where a company like Nintendo can come in and make threats to a fan project, and they can have it taken down simply because they know the developers don't have the resources to fight back. So we tend to assume it's legal to do this if you're not profiting off of it, but in a lot of ways, it just comes down to the whims of the IP owners, whether they're personally okay with it. I don't know. In the end, it seems like IP is only helpful for big established corporations. Without it, they'd be forced to prove that they can continue to make good art. They couldn't coast off of nostalgia and name recognition for a decade. If they failed, or if they let a series that people love just lay dormant on the shelf for decades, others could take up the mantle. That's a level playing field. Everyone's allowed to capitalize off of nostalgia. And at the same time, everyone is going to have higher expectations to deliver. But I know, I don't think realistically we're going to be abolishing intellectual property anytime soon. It's a nice dream. So what then? Is there any way to start bringing back this spirit of open collaboration? I don't have a great solution, but I've considered building a music platform where in order to post on the site, you have to agree that you're going to allow and encourage other musicians to take your songs and create new versions of them, change the lyrics, chords, the structure, whatever they want. Every new iteration would be linked in a chain of ancestry to what it inherited from. So you would have this way to see a song and then follow the trail of how it evolved. I'm not really certain this idea would catch on. I don't really know how to pitch this to other musicians, to be honest. It's part of why I made this video. I might try to make it anyway someday, but, let me know in the comments if you think it sounds like a good idea. As for the question of what an artist should do in a world that is likely to ignore you, in a time where, statistically speaking, you're going to be left as one of the many millions of forgotten artists who came and went with no impact, I wish I had something better for you than just, I don't know, keep doing it anyway. What's the alternative? You could sand down your edges and try to create something that fits squarely in the right box. But even that often doesn't work. And then you're training yourself to treat art not like an experience, but a product, something you can reverse engineer into its component parts so you can figure out how to replicate its success. Artists and marketers are different things. Which reminds me of one of the most common pieces of advice that you see for musicians who are trying to reach an audience online. They say, post on TikTok, post a lot, make short stuff or chop your stuff down into its most interesting bits, post often, post all the time. And if that works for you, great, I'm not judging, but what are you supposed to do if you don't have the stamina or the social bandwidth to make that work on a platform that's notorious for users having really short attention spans? It's easier than ever to make music, but it's at least as hard as it ever was to make it as a musician. I don't really blame the people who try to sell themselves, who sell out, as they say, because every artist would love to make a living being creative. But if you're someone who just isn't built for self-salesmanship, then you're kind of adrift without a sail. And that lack of success that you might be experiencing doesn't prove anything about your art. It says nothing about the level of skill or passion that you're putting into it. I say it's worth it. I say keep creating, even if making it a career is a hopeless endeavor. And you know what? Okay, let's say hypothetically, you will work for an uncountable amount of hours on your art all of your life, then die. And little to no one is ever going to appreciate it. If we take that as a foregone conclusion, which it isn't, there's an upside. You're completely unburdened from expectations. It's not going to work out anyway. You might as well do whatever the hell you want. Mistakes don't matter. The only thing that matters is what you're getting out of it. Thanks for watching. To all the people who left really nice comments on my Saw video, I sincerely appreciate that. I had zero idea that it was going to do as well as it did. This was obviously something a little bit different, and it's a little shorter, and it's a little bit less focused, but this is something I think about a lot, so I wanted to do this little video about it. I'm much too OCD to stay on a single topic and make videos that are all like TV analysis kind of videos or whatever, so I'm not going to really have a niche. It's going to bounce around. Next video is probably going to be about a game. After that, maybe something about a bad movie. So if you're interested in any of this, interested in hearing me ramble some more, then please stick around. I really appreciate having you. Thank you.